Democratic State Representative James Talarico of Austin, thank you so much, and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this deal that was struck on Wednesday afternoon at the Texas Capitol, and it provides $8.5 billion in new money for public schools, which is, as I understand it, $500 million more than what the last version was. So talk to me about your thoughts on this.
Well, this was a backroom deal that wasn't done in the House chamber or the Senate chamber. It was done among a select few, and we still haven't seen the bill language. I can't comment on the specifics of the bill, but I can say that our schools are in a historic hole. The legislature hasn't increased per student funding since 2019, my first session, and I'm in my fourth session. So our schools are in desperate need of substantially increased funding. This bill doesn't meet the moment. It is too little, too late, and schools will still close all over Texas, even if this bill passes, because it doesn't increase the basic per student allotment. It's a $0 increase in the basic allotment, which is the core of our school finance formula. So this bill is woefully inadequate to the crisis that we face in this state in public education.
Let me ask you, because how can you say that at the same time? I mean, there's $8.5 billion in new money being injected into public schools. So can you explain that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because people see a big number and they think it sounds pretty good, and it is better than nothing. But Texas is a big state, and so the numbers are going to sound big. But the comptroller said that we need at least $15 billion just to catch our schools up to 2019 funding levels, just to catch our schools up from the inflation over the last 6 years. And so 8 billion, 8.5 billion doesn't even get us close to that necessary number. So don't be fooled by the big price tag. Like I said, it's a big state, so we're always dealing in big numbers. But this doesn't even catch our schools up to 2019 funding levels, and that should be unacceptable for every Texan, regardless of their political party.
And let me ask you, because just from the outside looking in, because you mentioned that the basic allotment, I believe under the latest figure, it's going to go up about $55 from where the 2019 level. Is that correct?
Well, that's calculated through a golden penny yield. This is all pretty wonky, but it is an effective $0 increase to the basic allotment when all is said and done. 55 is almost nothing, but when you actually calculate it all out, it's going to be much more like $0 increase to the basic allotment. And again, that is the core of our school finance formula. It's what all of the student weights are amplified off of. It's what gives districts the flexibility to meet the challenges that each school district faces across Texas. And it's also is the only way to reduce recapture or Robin Hood payments for a lot of our growing suburban school districts. And so the fact that we're seeing an effective $0 increase to the basic allotment is a catastrophe for public education in the state. And that's on top of the $1 billion private school voucher scam that this legislature passed just a few weeks ago that will siphon off billions of dollars over the next 4 years. And so when you pair these two together, it is a disaster for our public schools in the state of Texas.
Now, the $1 billion on the education savings account bill comes from the general fund, not necessarily from the Public School Foundation Fund. But I did want to ask about, because the last time the House voted on this, House Bill 2, there was a $395 increase in the basic allotment. Is that right? And I think you voted for that. Is that right?
That's right. And that was inadequate to the challenge we face. We need at least a $1,300 increase to the basic allotment just to catch our schools up to 2019 funding levels, to catch us up from the inflation we've experienced in this state over the last 6 years. We needed $1,400 and we got $400. Now we're getting $0. And so I'm going to I'll vote for a $1 increase to public education funding. Our schools need any help they can get. My only point is that this is woefully inadequate to the challenge that our schools are facing across the state. And just to comment on the general revenue, this is all coming from the same pot of money. We can use general revenue funds to boost funding for public schools. So the $1 billion, and it'll be closer to $7 billion in the second biennium. That $7 billion from general revenue could be going to support our Texas public schools, and our governor made the decision to send that $7 billion to unaccountable private schools that mostly serve the wealthy few.
Well, I mean, that's $7 billion. That's the growth forecast, but the legislature in the 2027 session would still have to vote on that.
That's right.
But
That's right. So it's $1 billion
this
guaranteed,
session.
$7 billion forecasted. Either way you cut it, we shouldn't be sending any money to wealthy parents who already have their kids in private school when our public schools are closing all over the state of Texas, including in DFW. Fort Worth just announced they're going to close 19 elementary schools because of a lack of state funding. So we're seeing this everywhere, including here in Central Texas, in South Texas, in rural Texas. It's everywhere. And this school finance package with a $0 increase to the basic allotment isn't going to solve that core problem of keeping schools open. It will help in other areas, but it's almost like a donut hole where you are doing things around funding schools, but you're leaving a giant hole in the middle by not increasing that basic per student allotment.
So let's talk about that because I think it's interesting. I think what seems to be happening here, and you tell me, but what I've read and what we see as far as the funding, that this is basically the state legislature directing school districts to spend money on certain things. So teacher pay raises, $4.2 billion will go towards teacher pay raises and other staff, non-administrative staff, so that they can get salary increases. And so that's a requirement that the school districts are going to have to do. And then there's more money for special education, for school safety funding. It's selected money that's geared that, and the school districts have to spend that money. Where under the original House bill that was passed by the House, when there was that $395 increase in the basic allotment, that gave school districts a little bit more flexibility how to spend money. So is that what we're seeing here in some part of this is flexibility for school districts, which you prefer, versus more directed, targeted spending being legislated by the state lawmakers? Is that an accurate portrayal of what's going on here?
I think a school finance package should fund schools, not fund special projects related to schools. And some of these special projects are worthwhile, but the legislature is trying to act like the school board of Texas, and that is not our role. We have to respect local communities and allow them to make decisions for themselves. We have a constitutional obligation as a state government to adequately fund public education in this state. It is not our job to run every school. That's the principal's job. It is not our job to run every classroom. That's the teacher's job. As politicians here in Austin, our job is to give our local communities the resources they need to do the job that we're asking them to do. And so this school finance bill is funding a lot of special projects, including a lot of agency projects from the Texas Education Agency here in Austin, rather than directing those dollars to the classroom where they are desperately needed. And I will say, I'm glad that some teachers are going to get a pay raise under this bill, but it does not give every teacher a pay raise. We see the most turnover with teachers who are in the classroom for 5 years or less. And most of the generous pay raises are going to go to teachers who have been in the classroom for 5 years or more. And that's great for those teachers. They desperately need a pay raise. But we really should be using this record budget surplus to give every Texas teacher a substantial pay raise. In a lot of ways, this bill is giving our schools and our teachers crumbs when we are facing a school finance emergency. I compared it to the schoolhouse being on fire, and instead of grabbing the fire hose, the Republican leadership at the state capitol is throwing a cup of water on the flames, and that's just not going to meet the crisis that we're in.
And so, because I know Republicans say they want to incentivize those teachers who are in it for the long haul. And I believe under this latest proposal, it's teachers who have 3 years into the system plus start getting the raises. So if you're a first year teacher or a second year teacher, unless the districts act on their own, they're not going to get any state money. Is that right?
Well, and the teachers who are 3 and 4 years are not getting as much of a pay raise as teachers who have been here for longer. And again, I think that the experienced teachers and veteran teachers desperately need a pay raise, and we need to do that. What I'm saying is we have a $24 billion budget surplus in this state. And so we should be using that money to give pay raises to all teachers, especially teachers who are under 5 years, because that's where we're seeing the most turnover. And so, yes, we need to allow school districts to make these decisions, and we're not allowing them to do that because the basic allotment is going up by $0. And so there is no flexibility for districts to adapt to some of these challenges that they face in their local contexts.
I want to also ask you about uncertified teachers. I know this has become an issue in the state. And as I understand it, the latest deal would give $135 million for training programs, certification programs, and it would phase out the use of the allowance of uncertified teachers by 2030. Talk to me about that. Is this a good thing?
Yeah, we're facing a crisis in the teaching profession because we have seen stagnant salaries over the last 10 years. When you adjust for inflation, Texas teachers are making less than they did 10 years ago, which should be an outrage to all of us. I mean, teachers are the most important professionals in our community. Without the teaching profession, there would be no other professions. I was a public school teacher before I ran for office. And so I know that we've got teachers in this state who are driving Ubers at night to make extra money. We have teachers who are selling their own blood plasma so that they can make ends meet and support their families. We have veteran teachers who are discouraging their own children from becoming educators because of what's happened to this profession in this state. And so we have got to address this, and it's going to take a lot more than throwing a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 at our teachers. We need substantial pay raises across the board for every educator in this state. We should make Texas the #1 state to be a teacher. We should be stealing the best teachers from New York and Florida and California. We should make Texas the #1 destination to be a teacher. But instead of taking that kind of bold action that could transform our public education system, Texas Republicans are throwing crumbs at our schools and at our teachers.
But as far as this idea, this trying to the $135 million in funding for
Yeah,
trying to reduce the problem and phase out the problem of uncertified
it's a
teachers, what
great
do you
step.
make of?
Yeah, it's a great first step, but we need to do a lot more, is my point. If we're going to address this crisis of uncertified teachers in the classroom, of this historic teacher turnover, where you're seeing educators leaving the profession at a rapid rate, if we're going to address this crisis, then we've got to take bold, big action. So yes, I'm happy for some small first steps, but this legislature owes a lot more to the people of Texas, and we shouldn't be satisfied with these half measures that are only going to get us so far.
I do have one other topic to ask you about real quick because it's developed overnight, and that was in Congress. The Republicans there passed a bill, but one of the reconciliation bill on President Trump's agenda. But one of the things that it does include now is $12 billion for Congress to reimburse states like Texas that spent money securing the border during the Biden administration. And so I'm wondering what your thought is on that. This would enable states like Texas to apply for that formally.
Well, I think any money that we can bring back home to Texas is a good thing. And we've got plenty of resources here. Anything from the federal government is going to be welcomed. But all I'll say is those extra resources should be invested in our kids, in our students. That is the best investment that we can make as a state. We shouldn't be hoarding that money in the rainy day fund. We shouldn't be giving away, taxpayer dollars to wealthy special interests. We shouldn't be giving tax breaks to corporations. We shouldn't be creating loopholes for lobbyists and special interests. We should be using this money to invest in our people and in particularly our kids. That's where this this money should be, and it's where it will do the most good.
Democratic State Representative James Talarico of Austin, thank you as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.